First of all, I'll say Ramadan Kareem. It's an unusual Ramadan. It's a different kind of Ramadan. Obviously, with everything else going on, it makes Ramadan a bit different, but I'm still going to say Ramadan Kareem. And then introduce myself. I'm Dr. Justin Thomas. I generally don't like to give a big sort of intro to who I am and what I'm about, but I think it's useful to do it, not to be kind of big-headed or anything, but to sort of just give you a little bit of a background to understand my perspective and where I'm coming from. So I'm my doctorate is in experimental psychology. I'm also a chartered health psychologist with the British Psychological Society, and I have postgraduate qualifications in cognitive behaviour therapy and mindfulness-based stress reduction. So that's my sort of background. I'm so happy that I typed in overthinking. I've just noticed I've spelt it wrong. The title is Overthinking. Let me see if I can do it. I don't know why I'm so obsessed with this. I'm overthinking this overthinking thing, aren't I? Let me try and do it properly. I want to do it. I'm determined. Overthinking post. There we go. Post up. Do I have to unpin the other one first? Yeah, unpin it. No. Overthinking. Okay. Post. Haha. Okay, there we go. I feel a sense of peace now. I've managed to pin it as well. Alright, so I've introduced myself, so I'll introduce the topic finally, overthinking. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about overthinking. First of all, what it is, so definitions, what overthinking is, why we do it, yeah, what the consequences of it are, and I think most importantly, how not to do it. And I can't guarantee that by the end of the session you'll be able to not overthink, but just I think knowing that it is possible to not overthink can be quite helpful. So that's what I'm aiming for today. And also, if ideally what I'd like is for like kind of participation, if possible, for us to have a little bit of a discussion and a chat, if we can get there. So I think the first thing for me to do is ask you guys a question. So I've introduced myself, and I want to just to see, I want to just watch who's there and how this works. I'm going to ask a couple of simple questions if I can, and if you feel okay to just give me some answers so I can connect. I think my first question is, what's your favourite food? Which food do you like? What is your favourite food? Feel free to shout out. Anybody? Favourite food? What's your favourite food? Don't overthink it, just spit it out. What is your favourite food? No? Anybody? Favourite animal then? What's your favourite animal? Does anybody have a favourite animal? Oh, I can't see. I think it's lagging, guys. So I think you're answering, but I can't see anything. So maybe the interactive part's not going to work. So listen, I will talk for a bit, and if I start to see some messages, then we can get back into a dialogue. But right now, I can't see anything coming up on my screen. So listen, what I'll do, I'm going to go into talk mode. I try to avoid this because I prefer a conversation if possible. But until I can see you talk, it's going to have to just be me. Sorry about that. All right, so listen, so overthinking, so one of the things as a psychologist, we tend not to use the word overthink. I like the term overthinking, and we all kind of know exactly what it means. But psychologists will tend to use the term rumination or worry. Yeah, they're kind of two sides of the same coin. And I think this word rumination is quite telling. So rumination it's got two meanings in the English anyway. I don't know if there's an Arabic equivalent, but rumination is there's a type of animals, a class of animals. Animals can be split, if you like, mammals can be split into two types of mammal, ruminants and non-ruminants. And ruminants are the types of animals that chew their food, swallow the food, and then bring the food back up, chew it again, swallow the food, bring it back up again. So examples of animals that do that, for example, the bakara, the cow does it, the camel does it. They eat their food, swallow it, bring it back up, eat the food, swallow it, bring it back up. And that process is called rumination, but we also apply it to the mind. So this is the idea of overthinking. So the person thinks about the thing, lets it go for a second, and then thinks about it again, lets it go, thinks about it again. And so that's the idea of rumination. And it's not just thinking about things, it's thinking about things in a particular way. So rumination from a psychological perspective is a type of thinking that tends to be self-focused. The thoughts tend to be about the self, about me, and they also tend to be vague. Yeah, vague, not really clear. They're vague kind of thoughts, vague types of thoughts, no real clarity or no kind of precision to them. So these vague, self-focused thoughts. And here's the key to rumination is repetitive, istimraran. So rumination is this self-focused, vague, repetitive type of thinking style, usually in response to some kind of emotional upset. So either anger, we ruminate in response to anger, very common. We ruminate in response to people making us sad. So that's, from a psychological perspective, what we mean by overthinking is rumination. And then the other type of rumination, if you like, we call it worry, qalaq. So worry is obviously they're very, very similar. The difference is to do with the time frame. Rumination will tend to be retrospective. So rumination tends to be about something that's happened in the past or something that's already happened, whereas worry is the same type of vague, self-focused, kind of not really getting us anywhere cognition, but it tends to be about the future. So when I'm ruminating, I'm going to think, why does this happen to me? Why does nothing ever go right for me? Why do I have problems other people don't have? Why can't people just be nice? Why can't they just be nice? Why do I have problems other people don't have? Why? And you get the whole idea of it plays on. And they're questions, aren't they? They're questions that we don't, often they're questions, but we don't answer them. Yeah, that's what vague. So I'm just putting this question out there to myself and not answering it. And before I even get a chance to answer it, I'm asking another question. So why do I have problems that people don't have? Why is my life like this? Why can't people just be nice? Why can't people just be kind? Why can't people just leave me alone? And very often this is an inner conversation. It's not even a conversation, it's almost a monologue, because we don't answer the questions. Yeah, that's kind of a little bit of a difference between what we would call planning and being strategic and rumination, which is empty. In a plan, we might ask the question and answer it in a way that's useful and meaningful and takes us somewhere. But rumination tends to just be devoid of that sort of purposefulness, and it can go on and on and on. Same with worry. Worry would be, what if they don't like me? What if it goes wrong? What if I can't pin the happy UAE thing? And again, we can tie ourselves in knots, and it might go away for a while, but then it comes back again, and we end up locked, if you like. End up locked in a dance, this dance that we call overthinking, which is rumination, worry. Sometimes both of them are intertwined, and that's a hell of a strong perfume to try and deal with, and you mix those two together, rumination and worry. That can really, really feel like noise. In fact, someone said that once, the noisiest place on the planet, the noisiest place on the planet is inside the mind of somebody who's a chronic ruminator, someone who overthinks all of the time. There's no quiet there, there's no peace, there's no stillness. It goes on and on and on. So that's rumination. And when psychologists started to study it kind of from a scientific perspective, there's one lady whose name stands out above everybody else. She kind of got the party started with research into overthinking and rumination. And her name was Susan Nolan Hoeksema. I had the pleasure of kind of at distance working with her on a couple of projects early in my career, so it was a real honour. But she was interested. The question that she set out to answer, and this is all about overthinking, the question she set out to answer was why do women have much higher rates of depression than men. Women have, generally in most societies, women have much higher rates of al-iktiab, of depression, than men. And she wanted to find out why. What's the answer? Why do women generally have such higher rates of depression? And I think you might have some answers. I mean, I still can't turn this into a conversation because I still can't see your feed. Maybe it's something to do with me pinning that thing, is it? Is it to do with that? No, don't mess around, don't play with things. What are you doing? Let me type something, let me just test. Sorry, I'm going to get back to this. I don't want to test, I want everything to be perfect, and it's not. Okay. No, still whatever. Alright, so you might have some ideas about why women have higher rates of depression than men, and some of the common things that I said are things like, well, women are more open to report depression, which I think is true. But there are other factors, there definitely are other factors at play, and Susan Nolan Hoeksema, she kind of found the answer. She did lots of research. I think it's starting to work again. Hello. I just saw somebody say hello, that person. So Nolan, oh yay, we're back in business. I can start to see your stuff. So Nolan Hoeksema, anyway, so what she was interested in is why there's this gender difference in depression. And what she found, when she looked at all these different variables, what she found was that women tend to ruminate. Yeah, you can see me now. I can see you loud and clear. That's fantastic. I think maybe I broke it. It was something I did. I fiddled with it, and now it's working again. We're back in business. Fantastic. Listen, hello. It's nice to be. I felt like I was just on my own there. I thought maybe this is not even working. Maybe I'm just talking to myself. I started to overthink it a little bit. And how to stop overthinking? Yeah, we're going to get to that. But first, I want to get us deep into what overthinking is and the whole science behind it and the research behind it. Hello. B. Alka Theory 92. Yeah. Where was I up to? Gender differences in depression. So Nolan Hoeksema did this research, and it was groundbreaking at the time. This is in the 1980s when she started her work. We are so with you, Doc. I am so with you too. Overthinking causes grey hair. Is that right? It's an interesting question. Maybe I don't know is the answer from my perspective, but possible. Yeah, premature grey hair, possibly. I don't know. But this difference, gender difference between men and women, was really strong. And when you look at rumination, so when you look at people who ruminate, you can then forget about gender. That makes sense. If you want to predict who's more likely to develop depression, in the past you just look at gender. If it's a male or female, your prediction would be good if you predict that females. But if you look at whose rumination tendencies, people who overthink, people who ruminate more tend to go on to develop depression. But it isn't just depression. So what she found out also was that people who ruminated more, basically it's a mood amplifier. So whatever kind of emotional experience you're tasting at that moment, the taste is going to last longer if you ruminate. If you're in that state where you're thinking about it, where you're in that sort of, why me? Why do I have problems other people don't have? Why is she like that? How dare she speak to me like that? Who does she think she is? As long as you're doing that, you're gonna prolong and perhaps amplify, make bigger, deepen the emotion that gave rise, that the rumination was a reaction to. So if you like, what she found was that it also amplified anger. So when you upset someone, make them irritable, if they ruminate about it, if they continuously think about it in that repetitive, self-focused way, their anger gets bigger. Yeah? Their anger gets bigger, and then maybe they act on that anger, which, you know, then we get into a spiral, a downward spiral, flashpoint. So it really has consequences. And then the research, just so we understand that there's a lot of research behind this, and this is a really important, what we call it, a cognitive vulnerability for depression, a risk factor, a cognitive risk factor for al-iktiab. And again, we have to couch things in terms like depression. You know, it's a cognitive vulnerability for us not living our best life. It's a cognitive vulnerability for us not being able to get the most out of our relationships with one another. It's a cognitive vulnerability for us just generally having lower levels of well-being. Yeah, but most of the research at that time was done on depression. And one of the big studies, so it's the idea of it being a cognitive vulnerability, you have to follow people across time. And these studies have been done, so you look at thousands, usually it's done with students, so you look at thousands of students who've never had depression, so big universities in the US, but these studies were done, 10,000 students in the particular study I'm referring to, 10,000 students who've never had depression. Yeah, so they come in, they're happy, they're bright, they're first years, happy, bright first years, and they measured their tendency to ruminate, their tendency to be Baccara-like, ruminate, bring it back up, bring it back up. And then they followed them over their 3-4 years as students with one outcome in mind. Let's see who is more likely to end up with a diagnosis. So this is a clinical study. Who's going to end up with a clinical diagnosis of depression or anxiety? And voila, what they found was that rumination was one of the best. So the tendency to ruminate in response to sad mood, the tendency to do that was one of the best predictors of somebody going on to develop al-iktiab. This is young people in a 4 year period going on to develop al-iktiab. The strongest predictor was the tendency to ruminate. And this is still all of the work of Susan Nolan Hock-Seymour. And then other people got into this, and so this is as an area of research, this has grown. This is one of the, and it's really important for psychologists, this, because it's a modifiable vulnerability. Okay, so it's something we know. It's a predictor. If you have this tendency, it's going to predict that this is going to happen later on. Yeah, so it's a vulnerability. But what makes it even more important for us to focus on and give it some attention is that it's modifiable. We can change it. We don't have to be chronic overthinkers. There's things we can do. Yeah. So that was her work. One of her papers, which is, again, it's not, the title tells you everything. It's sort of why women cry and men get high. Yeah. So what she found, looking at gender differences, was people had different mood regulation strategies. So some people ruminated. Women were far more frequently ruminators. Some people, they got involved in what we call distracting activities. They distracted themselves, or they got involved in active coping, we might call it today, but she called it distracting activities. They didn't get depressed so much. If you were a distractor, you were less likely to get depressed. Then there were people who problem solved. Problem solvers were much less likely to get, so they problem solve, chronic problem solvers in response to sad mood. And then the final group, which had lots of men in, were risk takers, or engaging in dangerous activities. And so the types of activities, so not me personally, but people who have this particular style, when they experience a negative emotion, sadness or anger, they do something reckless. Maybe they take mukhaddarat or alcohol, or drive their car super fast. And again, that's not a very healthy way to deal with the sadness emotion. But it for those people ended up being depressed less. But obviously they go on to develop other potential problems like addiction. Yeah. So you tend to have in terms of addiction, you have a much higher rate for men, lower rate for women. In terms of depression, you have a much higher rate of depression for women and a much lower rate of depression for men. And Susan Nolan Hock-Seymour brought all of this back to this idea that it comes back to how we respond, or react is probably a better word, how we respond or react to sad moods. Yeah, sad moods are always going to be there, we're always going to have them, but we respond to sadness in different ways. I think you're back live with me now, so just share with me, if you can share with me, some of the different ways that people respond to sadness. How do you respond to sadness? What are some of the things that you do when you feel sad? What do you do when you feel sad? Eating too much. So eating is distraction, isn't it? Sleep is a kind of avoidance. Pray. Now we don't pray as a distraction, because distractions, it's an act of coping for sure. Dance and pray. Hopefully not at the same time. Cry all night. So crying can be cathartic. So think more. I mean, often I think that's an important one. We think to try to solve the problem, but sometimes some problems are not solvable. Need someone to talk with. That can be problem solving. It can be problem solving, or it can be ruminating out loud, which is a disaster, because people eventually just get a headache. All you do is, why me? Why is my life? Why is she like that? Why doesn't she? You know, it doesn't go anywhere. Listen to music and comedy. Distraction. Work out, again, it's another form of. I think workout's a little bit different. It's more than distraction, because depending on what kind of workout you do, you have to really put your attention somewhere. Talk too much. Yeah, be sociable. Move on. Yeah, talk to some people. Yeah, so everyone's giving me all the good stuff, but we know there's many different ways to respond. You know, there's many different ways that we can react to anger. Well, okay, that was sadness. What do we do when we feel angry? What are some people's mood regulation strategies around anger? Get myself busy, clean up the house. Okay, so that idea of sublimation, put that energy, that anger energy, into something useful. Thinking about anger, what do we do when we feel angry? Do we sit there and do we think, how dare he say that to me? Who does she think she is? Haywana. How dare these people treat me this way? Isolating myself, eat less, and think, why? What do I do? See, what always fascinates me when you ask these questions is the diversity. You know, some people say, I go and chill out with people, talk too much, talk to people. Other people say, I isolate myself. Some people say they eat a lot. Some people say they eat less. So you can see from your answers, there's a great diversity in the way in which we respond to our emotions. Work out. My mom always says I lose weight because of anger. So but is that fast? So you get angry and then the weight just falls off, or is that you must be angry for a few weeks at least? Yeah. All right. So there's lots of different ways in which we respond. But so Nolan Hoxima gave us those 4. Then she gave us these: talking to self makes me get angry even more and come up with worse assumptions. So this is the whole idea of the self-talk. The negative self-talk can sometimes take us down to a darker place, and this is the idea behind why rumination can sometimes take us to a dark place, and it can be hard to get away from that. Same with worry. Yeah, worry can just overwhelm us so that we can't think straight at all. Yeah, and obviously takes a physical impact on our body too. Try to respond in the same day. Try not, so give yourself some time, some space to be with the mood, just to be with it, yeah, rather than do anything. It's a great answer. Downward spiral, yeah. How do we say overthinking? Okay, that's cool. That's good to know. Scream out loud. There's an idea of catharsis. Speak in Arabic. So when you feel sad, you speak in Arabic. تكلم عربي. عندما تشعر الحزن بالحزن. That was good. Sometimes if I feel anger, I might think in Arabic. Like occasionally, my Arabic is not good at all, but I know a few words so well that they've become my go-to words in Arabic. So if someone upsets me or says something that is just ridiculous, I might just automatically think ma yakhsa or zabala, like it's rubbish for the bin or something like that. So yeah, language. What language do we think in? Because most of you guys, I know plenty of people in the audience are bilingual. What language are we? What language do we overthink in? That's an interesting question. Overthinking in what language? English, Arabic, Farsi, Hindi. You know, if you're bilingual, especially, your Arabic is so cute. Wallah, Professor JT. Shukran, shukran. Thank you so much. How to avoid being a perfectionist. It's an interesting one because perfectionism and rumination go together, don't they? Procrastination and rumination go together. These are all part of a kind of a package deal to some extent. Yeah. And worry, let's not forget about worry, because worry, again, even though the researchers, the different people who've been involved in research into worry and rumination and depression, but they're so similar, it's unbelievable. Okay, so we know that if we ruminate, when we give our attention to anything, we make it bigger. It's that simple. So giving our attention to something in a way that's not really solving the problem, and very often the things we're thinking about when we overthink are, we might tell ourselves, I'm just trying to solve this out, I'm trying to work this out, I'm trying to work this through in my head. But very often that's just not the case, because it's not something that can be solved. You know, and that's where the problem lies. That's why it doesn't stop. So there you go. How to stop rumination. That's where we're moving to, Khawla. That's what I'm trying to make sure we all appreciate it, but also appreciate how problematic it can be. Yeah. So again, it blows up our anger, it inflates our anger, it magnifies our qalaq, and it magnifies our sadness. And perhaps even, sadness is natural and healthy, and it's okay to feel sad, but overthinking and rumination can turn sadness into something else that's different. Do people overthink? Do people who overthink don't act? No, I think the two can be connected. Like, people can overthink and then still act. Procrastination is when we're overthinking and then maybe we don't do the thing we're meant to do. But you can overthink, or you can act in a way that allows you to overthink. So some people have said this, if you're in a room full of people, it can be a little bit harder to overthink because people are talking to you, you're being sociable. But very often what people will do when they're in a bad mood is they'll go away to be by themselves so they can think it through and sort out. And sometimes we do. If we're a problem solver, sometimes that's what we need to do. But very often it's this empty type of rumination. Let's call it Baqara rumination, where we're just going round and round and round, taking all of our own energy away. And it's so busy and noisy in there, and it's so narrow, like we don't see anything else. All of the joy of life becomes shut out. We don't see the blue of the sky, we don't hear the birds singing. Everything is gone because we're narrowly focused on, how dare they do this to me? Why is my life like this? Why do I have problems other people don't have? And I'm not belittling it, because it's not something we often have control over, but we can work on it. It's something we can modify. And I think I've talked a lot about depression. I don't think we need to wait for something like a psychological disorder to be diagnosed in order for us to kind of take advantage of this knowledge. This is something that can be leveraged, used to improve our well-being, ideally before we visit darker places or before we damage relationships because of our anger. Okay, so listen, what can we do instead of overthinking? One last thing, actually, before I move on to the what, because this is an interesting new idea, and I think this does connect to part of the solution. شو تخصص هو? What's his specialty? أنا عالم النفس خقاق. وايد خقاق عالم النفس. One of the things that recent research has suggested is that rumination, this is counterintuitive, it just kind of doesn't make sense. Rumination, so overthinking the problem, is a way to avoid the problem. Yeah? Overthinking the problem is a way to avoid the problem. We call this experiential avoidance. And that sounds weird. So wait there, you're saying constantly thinking about how sad I feel and how life isn't fair, I'm avoiding the problem. I'm not. I'm constantly thinking about it, but we're constantly thinking about it so we don't feel it. Yeah. So rather than say overthinking, we might think about it as under feeling. Yeah. Not allowing ourselves to just feel sad. Just feel the sad. Be with the sad. Just feel the anger. Be with the anger. No need to put a narrative to it. No need to tell. The telling of the story gives us kind of maybe some false hope of a quick escape, that we'll find an answer when sometimes when there's no answer to be found. And that, again, that idea, I think, is, for me personally, I think that rings really true. Very often that extra noise, that continuous overthinking, is because we're trying to escape from the feeling of sadness. And it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel acting on these things is problematic, but feeling them can be, it's natural. Yeah. So I think that's part of it. That can be part of it. The overthinking, it's experiential avoidance. It's a way to escape. We're overthinking to escape from feeling. It's one way to frame it. Okay, so what can we do then? What are the alternatives? What can we do instead of this overthinking thing? What else can we do? What are the alternatives? Well, Nolan Hoeksema, she gave us 4, didn't she? So overthinking's out. So we've still got 3 others. So one of them is active coping, or if you like, kind of getting involved in something else. Yeah. Consciously taking our attention and giving it to something else. And many of you have mentioned those ideas there. So exercise, listening to music, prayer, giving our attention, self-focused attention. Now your attention is no longer focused on yourself. It's focused on something greater, much greater than yourself. It's away from you. It's away from your current problems, and you're looking at something much bigger. So it's the idea of prayer, the idea of exercise. Especially some people, they work out really hard, like this hardcore exercise. You haven't got time to ruminate. Yeah, if you're running really, really quickly and you become focused on your body, yeah, you need to pay attention to where you're putting your feet. If you're running on a treadmill, your attention is drawn to this thing. Other people, they paint. What's the difference between overthinking and feeling sad? One of them is a feeling, one of them is an emotion. Yeah, it's felt, it's physiologically felt. The other one is mental activity in the brain. One of them is doing, overthinking is doing. Sadness is being. You can be sad, yeah, but we do thinking. And that's why we get tired when we overthink, for sure. They're connected, because when we feel sad, often what we will do is overthink. And some people feel that the overthinking is a dysfunctional or a not very useful way of regulating the emotion, of managing the sadness. There are better ways to manage the sadness, if you like. Manage is the wrong word, because we're not sadness's boss, we're not its manager. There are different ways of being with sadness, of connecting with sadness, other than trying to analyse it to death. Why do I feel like that? And there's no answer sometimes. When I listen to music or do anything else, I run from problems. And this is a good point, because this is what we're saying is distraction. So I'm feeling really sad, but I'm going to go for a run. I'm feeling really sad, so I'm going to go and paint a picture. But they're what we call active. Yeah, they might buy us some time. They're active coping strategies. Even listening to music, yeah, it's running away from the problems. Yeah, but if the problems are real problems that can be solved, then of course it can buy us some time. You can get, like someone mentioned before, we don't want to do it reactively straight away. Maybe go away, calm down, get our head right, and then come back and solve the problem. But very often we tell ourselves we're solving the problem when all we're doing is not. We're just kind of regurgitating the consequences of the problem. We're regurgitating how bad the problem makes us feel. I can't believe I feel this bad. I can't believe this is the worst ever. We're not feeling, we're talking about how bad we feel. We're thinking. But I think it's a really good question. Many people die. Many people die from overthinking. I don't think they die directly from overthinking, but for sure there are hundreds of thousands of people every year who take their own life due to an intihar, suicide. So it is a serious issue. Not everyone who takes their own life is depressed, but there's a huge risk associated with being severely depressed. Yeah, so we know that overthinking, rumination is a risk factor for becoming depressed, and we know that depression is a risk factor for suicide. So it is, many people do die indirectly from overthinking, for sure, and many relationships break up. Human relationships break up because of overthinking or because of the actions we get involved in due to overthinking. Overthinking do lead to suicidal thoughts. Maybe, sometimes, not always. People are different, but it can do. Overthinking we call it a depressogenic cycle. So overthinking makes us sadder, and then we overthink harder, which makes us sadder. And for some people, they get locked into a downward sort of cycle. And then that's when it's real low ebb. But what I want to move on to now are solutions. So I hope we've all got a better idea about overthinking, thinking about it as rumination, thinking about it as not problem solving, that's functional, but thinking about it as this empty self-focused, where there's maybe a problem not to be solved. Why don't people like me? Why aren't people nice to me? Are you going to solve that problem? Anyway, so what can we do? So this idea of putting our attention somewhere else, active coping, and we've had a long list of active coping, and I think someone rightly mentioned, though, this distraction, is it just running away from our problems? Is it just running away from them? I think it's not. It's a question I think we have to ask ourselves individually. In some cases it might be. It might buy us some time. We might need to do that as part of a self-care strategy, take care of ourselves, run away for a while, calm down, re-energize, and then maybe in a better state to deal with the problem. But it's certainly, active coping is certainly, it has better outcomes than back or rumination, overthinking. So active coping would be number one. So there's a long list of things that take our attention, and we can put our attention painting, running, walking, conversation with friends, and then we can kind of get ourselves hopefully into a space where we're better able to re-engage with whatever the complications are in our life. And not everything is solvable, though. Not all, I think engineers, muhandiseen, everything is a problem that has a solution, and in that world it is. Like in the world of building houses, all problems are soluble, but in the complex, sophisticated sphere of the human soul, not everything is soluble. Not everything can be broken down as a problem that has a solution. We're far too infinitely sophisticated and complex for that to be, for us to take that approach to the human soul. So there isn't always, kind of a binary sort of mathematical solution that would even allow us to call it a problem in the first place. But the other thing, and that leads me nicely to the next of the mood regulation strategies, problem solving. No one's going to knock that. If there's a problem and we can solve it and we can take concrete steps, I think as a useful tip, because if we're ruminating, sometimes we don't think we are. We'll tell ourselves, I'm problem solving, I'm sorting my life out, I just need some time by myself to sort my life out. And what we'll do is ruminate. I think for me, and this is maybe not true for everyone, but for me, the difference between rumination and problem solving is when I'm problem solving, I'll probably have a pen in my hand, so it won't be going round istimraran continuously. There'll be some tangible outcome from it. That will be, for me, one of the differences. So problem solving, if the problem has, if it's that kind of thing that lends itself to problem solution, obviously then Nolan Hoek-Seema's final one, risk taking, you don't want to go down that road. That's a dangerous road. That was where she said people manage their mood by engaging in these risky activities. They just start a new relationship. They, maybe they self-medicate with substances, mukhaddarat, to kind of chase away the sad feelings. And that can have, that's like, what is it? There's those stories where people bring the dogs to get rid of the cats, and then they need to bring something else to get rid of the dogs. you know, it's just chasing one, it's just substitution. You just substitute depression for an addiction or for a broken relationship, you know, and then still have to possibly face the prospect of the sadness later on. Dopamine, good word. Yeah, it's a nice neurochemical for sure. Adrenaline. Well, that I think there's a good point there, because the whole adrenaline thing. If you think about, in my own self, I used to see this, not anymore. I think many years ago, when I felt upset, and usually with me it might have been anger, I would get in my car and I would drive really fast, which is dangerous. Sorry I was ever in that state of mind, but I did. And what I noticed when I was driving really fast was that when you drive really fast, you have to pay attention to the road. When you drive slow, you can do whatever, but when you drive really, really fast, yeah, and you're zigzagging in and out of cars, you have to pay attention, because you know at any minute if you make a mistake, big problem for you and for whoever you hit. So your attention you have to be wired. So the whole idea of adrenaline, doing risky behaviours that take a lot of our attention, because if we make one slip, it will mean death. But that's high risk, you know. That's, again, it comes with a lot of potentially negative consequences. Okay, so there's some alternatives. The best two out of Nolan Hoek-Seema's bag would be distraction, active coping, distraction, and problem solving. Okay, but I'm not going to leave it there for sure. I'm not going to leave it there, because many people will know, even when you try to, if you're really thinking about something that's on your mind, something that's weighing heavy on your heart and it's in your head, you can watch a movie and you're not watching the movie. It's still going on. You can draw a picture, but you're not really there, or you just don't even want to. It takes all the energy away from you, and you don't want to do these things. So one of the alternatives, another alternative that's become more common in recent years, is the whole idea of what we call attention training. So you don't do this while you're overthinking. You do this, ideally you do this when you're in a good place. There you go, meditation, attention training, meditation, mindfulness meditation. So I mentioned at the start, this is one of my areas, and this is where this research has led to. This is why mindfulness, risky behaviours do cause other problems, but this is one of the reasons why mindfulness has become such a big concept. Even people talk about Mac mindfulness, and which kind of belittles it a little bit, but there's some real science behind this, and it grows directly out of Nolan Hoek-Seema's work. The people that started to talk about using mindfulness in therapy were all very familiar with Nolan Hoek-Seema's work. And so the idea of meditation, or mindfulness meditation, as a if you like, as a counterweight, as a solution, I don't like that word, as a response to overthinking, is to practice. I have a question about the TED Talk assignment. For how long should we? How dare you interrupt my happy UAE with a question about the assignment? 6 minutes. That's the answer. So mindfulness, yeah. So this idea of using mindfulness meditation as a solution, wrong word, as a potential response to turn down overthinking is, for me, spot on, because it's got everything else we've talked about. It's all about attention, yeah. So distraction is all about attention. The whole distraction stuff is all about attention. But with meditation, it's self-focused. Yeah, so you're not just putting your attention somewhere else. With meditation, it's self-focused. Generally, what you're going to be focusing on when you start is your body and your breath. So they're always there. And okay, it's kind of boring, yeah, and it doesn't work for everyone. So I want to say straight away. So that's why we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got different things, but for many people it does work, and for some people they need to be introduced. There's different ways to do it, you know. Again, it's one of these things I struggle to talk about, because whenever you say meditation, and there's nothing wrong with this, but people always imagine someone with their legs crossed and their fingers, fingers like this. And it kind of doesn't have to be that. Meditation essentially, or let's call it attention training, just means practicing paying attention on purpose to whatever. It doesn't need to be you sitting with your legs crossed, although that's perfectly fine. That's good for your posture too. But it could be making a cup of tea, with mindfulness. It could be your just renewing your intention if you pray your salah. Many people will know when you pray your prayers, your mind then just disappears and goes off somewhere. So the idea of bringing khushu', I think it's the word khushu', bringing that is a form of meditation, is noticing that your mind has wandered off and bringing it back. If you ever listen to these meditation apps, that's all you're going to hear is, and if your mind wanders off, just come back to the breath. And if your mind wanders off 1,000 times, just come back. And that is the practice. The practice is allowing the mind to wander off, noticing that it's wandered off. Yes. And ihtifal al-awda, celebrating the return, noticing that that's because very often we ruminate and we don't know we're ruminating. So meditation makes us more aware, so that we become more metacognitively aware. We become more aware of what we're actually doing with our waking consciousness. What are we doing with our mind? We become more aware. I've just been ruminating. Do I really want to do that? If you're aware, you have a choice. If you're not aware, you don't have a choice. Awareness is the mother of choice. So again, this idea of not overthinking, it's like swimming. It takes practice. You can't just do it straight away or do it one time and expect you get it. Maybe you have to give it some time, but it's attention training. Allowing your mind wanders off and you bring it back. So now when you're ruminating, because you've practiced this many times, when you start to ruminate, first of all you notice you've ruminated, and second of all, because you've practiced bringing your attention, you're able to bring your attention away from those thoughts and maybe hold it somewhere more useful, as in making the cup of tea, or showering, or walking, or cleaning your teeth, or sitting and focusing on your breath. Whichever practices work for you. It's a gift, honestly, it really is. I don't want to package it, say it's mindfulness and, come and take a mindfulness course with me for only $9,999. It's not that kind of gift, and there's many different ways. There's many different ways to bend the knee. There's many different ways to achieve this, but I think it's critical in our age, in our distraction-filled age, where many of us have grown up with multiple distractions, is that we are able to find some moments of stillness and tranquility and quiet and peace in our lives. And it might take a little bit of practice. It might mean we have to carve out some time in the day for that to happen, and we might have to practice, because when we sit still and quiet for a while, our mind wanders. But that's okay. But we have a choice to bring it back. And so when people tell people don't overthink, it's like telling somebody who is drowning, don't drown. You need to learn to swim. And I believe training in meditation, prayer, salah, all these different ways of becoming more mindful of practicing, listening to people. Mindful listening when you have a conversation with someone, really trying not to think about what you're going to say next, not trying to, think about a clever, witty response to what they're saying, but just trying as best you can to give the person you're having a conversation with 100% of your attention. Like that, again, if it's done consciously, what you're doing, it's like a workout. You're practicing, you're practicing paying the art, the art of paying attention. You're having a workout in the art of paying attention. Don't think of a pink elephant yet. The minute someone says that, you're thinking of pink elephants forever, or for a while at least. But again, it's okay. The mind will wander off, and we will find ourselves Ruminate, it's a good point as well, being kind to yourself. Very often rumination is not kind at all. Why am I such a loser? Why can't I just speak to people normally like everybody else? Why am I so weak? That's sometimes what we, in our rumination, that's sometimes where, and that's a double punch, isn't it? It's not only are we kind of losing energy and losing out on experience because we're locked in there, but as has been said, it's unkind. So again, being kind to ourselves, again, giving ourselves some peace and quiet as well is a gift. Yeah. Hello, Nadine. Listen, I think that's all I had to say. So if there are any questions, we can have it. I think there's about 10 minutes left. But that was my piece. I think that was the main thing I wanted to do, was just really take this overthinking seriously when, it does have this connection to problems. And it's not something it's not something that's built into our normal educational system, is it? We don't think about thinking. Yeah, it's just something everyone knows how to think. Just get on with it, Learning how to think, courses in thinking, philosophy maybe. Why do I feel anxious and detached when I meditate? It's a great question. I honestly don't know. I don't know why you feel anxious and detached when you meditate. But what I would be curious about is what that anxiety feels like. Yeah, that's what I would be in. I meditate, and whenever I feel like anger or when I feel some emotion, what we try to encourage people to do is just become curious about it. And you're already curious, aren't you? You're asking the question, why do I feel anxious and detached? Go deeper with the feeling. What's the anxiety feel like? Where do you feel it in your body? Yeah? Become curious about it. Yeah? Become curious about the anxiety in a kind way, not to beat yourself up. I shouldn't feel anxious. No, it's a helpful emotion. Anxiety helps us, can save our life. It's there for a reason. But be curious about it. Can we suggest changing routines as a solution for overthinking? I agree. Again, changing routines can be this idea of distraction. Yeah, it can be a form of distraction. But when the overthinking is deep, it might not work. Or just the energy to do that sort of thing might not be there. But yeah, like when you're on holiday, very often you don't have time to overthink. I think why people like holiday, you go somewhere new, and you're just like, oh, shoof hada, shoof high, shoof. When you're on holiday, it's like, wow, your attention is out, isn't it? But when you're back in your routine, nothing stimulates you so much, so you have more time for the old Baqarah, the rumination, the Baqarah rumination. Ya salam. Are we supposed to feel like floating with? No, you can. I hope you do. It's nice to float, but I think this is, again, one of the misconceptions with meditation is it's not always meant to feel nice. It's not always meant to feel calm and relaxed and tranquil. It's okay not to feel okay. Just be curious about the feelings, and kind of explore the feelings. Sometimes it's nice, positive feelings, pleasant feelings. Sometimes it's unpleasant feelings. It's part of the beauty of life. The visitors, the different moods that visit us. Wouldn't it be boring if you were happy all the time? I think when we are more tolerant with ourselves, it helps decrease the rumination. Yeah, I agree with that. And maybe not decrease the rumination, but the rumination isn't so hurtful. Oh, there's me again being sakhif. Oh well, it's not so, because we can be, our rumination, the thoughts, the content of our rumination can be quite self-critical. I'm such a loser, I'm such a weak person. Feelings make me tired. I would disagree. I don't want to fight with you, but I honestly think it's the thinking that makes us tired. I think the feelings are just there. When you that feeling of being drained and tired, very often that's from the cognitive energy. I might be wrong, but I think the feelings often energize us. Definitely anger will energize you, anxiety will energize you to a certain extent, worry will then drain you. Overthinking affects self-confidence. Yeah, again, it depends on the content of the rumination. Guilt, I missed it because it's gone, but guilt is another one. But that's another case, isn't it, where the guilt, yeah, again, as an emotion, yeah, and we can go two ways with the overthinking. We can try to justify, or we can feel the guilt, and the guilt is telling us, if we feel guilt, the guilt is telling us repair the damage, yeah, do something to fix it. That's what guilt. So guilt, it's not pleasant, it's not nice to feel, but if you overthink guilt and chase it away, you've lost the opportunity to do reparations, to make it right. Yeah. You mostly overthink when you have less self-confidence. I think there's a relationship there, but I don't know. Some people can be really kind of maybe quite self-confident and still overthink too, I believe. Yeah, but I think there can be relationships. There's lots of complex relationships between self-esteem, self-confidence, how we feel about ourselves, and the way we speak to ourselves. You're asking me some great questions here. Thank you for these questions. Some people see overthinking as a habit, and totally. It becomes a habit, and it can become a worse habit with time. That's why I'm emphatic about trying to take on board some attention training, call it what you will, or we train our body all the time. Many people now in the world, everyone's training this, but we do need to train this too. And a big important part of this, if you like, the boss of our mind is our attention. That chooses where we've got an intellect which is super clever, but above our intellect is our attention. That chooses where we direct our intellect. We can either use it to analyse something nonsensical, or we can use it to find the vaccine for COVID-19. But it's attention that's going to be the driver. Attention is important, so important for individuals, and it's important for society.